"Please kill my grandfather for me," whispered 8-year-old Marcus as he stood in the doorway of the Rainbow Diner, clutching a crumpled $10 bill. The entire restaurant fell silent. Even the coffee stopped brewing. Big Mike, a 6 feet 4 inches man covered in prison tattoos, was the first to look up from his breakfast. The halfway house residents always met here every Tuesday morning, 12 ex-felons trying to rebuild their lives after decades behind bars. They'd seen everything, but this was different. Marcus had walked 3 miles in the freezing rain to find them. His small frame was shaking, not just from the cold, but from the fresh bruises covering his arms. One eye was swollen shut, and his lip was split open. "Where's your parents, kid?" asked Carlos, a former gang leader who'd spent 15 years in maximum security for armed robbery. His voice was surprisingly gentle for someone with death before dishonor tattooed across his knuckles. "My mom died last year," Marcus replied, his voice barely audible. "I live with Grandpa now, but he hurts me when he drinks. Last night he said he's gonna kill me like he killed my mom." The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 20 degrees. These men knew violence intimately, they'd lived it, breathed it, survived it. But seeing it inflicted on an innocent child triggered something primal in their damaged souls. Tommy the Fish Rodriguez, who'd been out of prison for only 2 months after serving 22 years for manslaughter, slowly stood up. His hands were clenched into fists. "Where does this grandfather live, kid?" "The old apartment complex on Cedar Street. Building C, apartment 3B, Marcus answered. "But everyone's scared of him. Even the police don't come when neighbors call." That's when Big Mike noticed something that made his blood run cold. Marcus wasn't just asking random strangers for help. The boy had specifically sought out ex-convicts because he believed they were his only option. This child was so desperate that he thought killers were his salvation. But what none of them realized was that Marcus had been watching them for weeks, studying their routines, learning their names. This wasn't a random encounter, it was a carefully planned last resort from a boy who'd already tried everything else. As Marcus stood there trembling, holding his $10 like it was his life savings, the ex-prisoners exchanged looks that communicated years of unspoken understanding. They all recognized the look in the boy's eyes because they'd worn it themselves once, the look of someone who'd lost all hope in the system. What happened next would test everything these men had learned about second chances and whether people could truly change. If you're finding this story as gripping as we are, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because what these ex-convicts decided to do will restore your faith in human redemption in the most unexpected way. But there was something Marcus wasn't telling them, something hidden in his backpack that would soon reveal the true extent of his grandfather's evil and change the entire course of this story. "Kid, you can't just walk in here asking us to." Big Mike's voice trailed off as Marcus slowly unzipped his backpack. Inside wasn't toys or school supplies. It was a composition notebook, its pages filled with dates, times, and detailed descriptions written in a child's handwriting. "I've been keeping track," Marcus whispered, flipping through pages covered in crayon drawings of stick figures, one big one hitting smaller ones. "Every time he hurts me, every time he says mean things about my mom. My teacher told us to write in journals, so I did." Carlos leaned forward to read over Marcus's shoulder. His face went pale. "December 15th, Grandpa threw me down the stairs because I spilled juice. December 22nd, he burned my hand on the stove and said accidents happen to bad kids. January 8th, he told me Mom died because she was worthless, just like me." The diner had become a morgue. These hardened criminals who'd committed every crime imaginable sat in stunned silence as an 8-year-old calmly documented months of systematic abuse with the methodical precision of a detective. "There's more," Marcus continued, turning to a section filled with phone numbers. "I called Child Services 14 times. They said they'd investigate, but Grandpa always cleans up before they come. He makes me shower, puts makeup on my bruises, and threatens to hurt me worse if I tell them anything." Tommy's hands were shaking with rage. "What about your neighbors? Your school?" Somebody had to notice. "Mrs. Patterson next door called the police twice," Marcus replied matter-of-factly. "But Grandpa knows Officer Jenkins from the bar. They just laugh and leave. And my teacher, Miss Rodriguez, she asked about my bruises once. Grandpa told the principal I fall down a lot because I'm clumsy. They believed him." That's when the real horror hit them. This wasn't just child abuse, it was a complete system failure. Every adult who should have protected Marcus had either ignored him, failed him, or actively participated in covering up his suffering. "Why haven't you run away?" asked Elena, the only woman in their group, who'd done time for armed robbery but had never hurt a child in her life. Marcus looked at her with eyes too old for his face. "Where would I go? I'm 8. I don't have money, I don't have family. And Grandpa always finds me anyway. Last time I tried hiding at the library, he dragged me home and locked me in the basement for 3 days with no food." The ex-convicts exchanged looks of pure murder. They'd all been victims of violence themselves, but seeing it inflicted on someone so innocent and helpless triggered every protective instinct they'd buried during their years behind bars. "But last night was different," Marcus continued, his small voice cracking. "He was drunker than usual. He started hitting me with his belt, and when I cried, he said he was going to finish what he started with my mom. He said she didn't die in a car accident like he told everyone. He said he pushed her down those same stairs and watched her die." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the kitchen had stopped making noise. "That's when I knew," Marcus said, closing his notebook. "The police won't help. Child services won't help. Nobody believes kids like me. But I heard you guys talking in here before. I heard Mr. Carlos say that in prison, people who hurt kids don't last long. So I thought, maybe you'd understand." Big Mike stood up slowly, his 6 feet 4 inches frame casting a shadow over the entire booth. "Kid, what you're asking us to do, we can't. We're trying to stay out of trouble, trying to build new lives." Marcus's face fell, but he nodded with the resignation of someone who'd been disappointed by adults his entire life. "I understand. Thank you for listening anyway." He started to pack his notebook back into his backpack, but Carlos grabbed his wrist gently. "Hold on. We didn't say we wouldn't help. We just said we can't do what you're asking." "What Carlos means," Elena added, "is that there are other ways to handle monsters like your grandfather. Ways that won't send us back to prison or make you an orphan." Marcus looked up hopefully, but before anyone could explain, his face suddenly went white with terror. Through the diner window, a rusted pickup truck had just pulled into the parking lot. Behind the wheel sat a large man with gray hair and cold eyes, scanning the restaurant like a predator hunting prey. "He found me," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "He always finds me." The grandfather stepped out of his truck and started walking toward the diner entrance with the confident swagger of a man who'd never faced real consequences for his actions. What he didn't realize was that he was about to walk into a room full of people who understood violence far better than he ever would, and who had just been given every reason to use that knowledge against him. As the door chime announced his arrival, 12 ex-felons slowly turned to look at the man who'd been terrorizing a child, and something shifted in the air that even the grandfather could feel. But in his arrogance, he interpreted their stares as fear rather than the barely controlled rage they actually represented. He had no idea that his grandson hadn't just found help, he'd found an army. "Marcus. Get over here, boy." The grandfather's voice boomed across the diner as he spotted his grandson cowering in the corner booth. His eyes were bloodshot from drinking, and his massive frame filled the doorway like a storm cloud. "You've been gone for hours. Time to come home and face your punishment." But instead of the usual scramble of frightened customers, something unexpected happened. Not a single person in the Rainbow Diner moved. 12 ex-convicts slowly turned their heads toward the grandfather with the kind of synchronized menace that comes from years of prison hierarchy. Big Mike stood up first, his 6 feet 4 inches frame unfolding like a mountain coming to life. "Excuse me, sir. The boy is talking to us right now." The grandfather's confident swagger faltered for just a moment as he took in the scene. Hardened faces covered in prison tattoos, hands that had clearly seen violence, eyes that held no fear of authority. But his arrogance quickly returned. "I don't know who you people think you are, but this is my grandson. He belongs to me." He started walking toward Marcus, but Carlos casually slid out of his booth, blocking the path. "Belongs to you?" Carlos repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. "Funny choice of words. See where we come from. Kids aren't property. They're people who deserve protection." The grandfather's face flushed red with rage. "You have no right to interfere with my family business. I'll call the police." Tommy laughed, a sound devoid of any humor. "Go ahead. Call Officer Jenkins. I'm sure he'll be very interested to see the evidence this boy has been collecting." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the grandfather's face. What evidence? Elena stood up next, pulling out her phone. See, while you've been terrorizing a child, you forgot that technology exists. Marcus here is smarter than you gave him credit for. She showed him the screen. 16 people in this diner just witnessed you threaten and intimidate an 8-year-old boy. That's on video now. And that's not all, added Marcus quietly, reaching into his backpack again. This time he pulled out something that made his grandfather's blood run cold, a small digital camera, the kind used for wildlife photography. My real dad was a photographer, Marcus explained, his voice stronger now with 12 protectors surrounding him. He hid this in my room before he died. I've been using it to record everything you do to me when you think I'm sleeping. The grandfather's face went white. You little. Careful, Big Mike warned, taking a step forward. You're outnumbered 12-1, and every word you say is being recorded. I'd think very carefully about what comes out of your mouth next. But the grandfather's rage overrode his common sense. You think some ex-cons and a lying kid can intimidate me? I know people in this town. I know judges, prosecutors, police officers. Nobody's going to believe a bunch of criminals over an upstanding citizen like me. That's when Doc, who'd been quietly making phone calls in the corner, looked up from his cell phone with a smile that would have terrified the devil himself. Funny you should mention knowing people in high places. Because I just got off the phone with my parole officer, who happens to be married to a social worker. And she's very interested in meeting Marcus. I also called my sister, added Elena. She's a nurse at Children's Hospital. Amazing how fast Child Protective Services moves when a medical professional calls in suspected abuse with photographic evidence. The grandfather's bravado was cracking. You can't prove anything. Kids lie all the time. Maybe, Carlos agreed. But security cameras don't. And this diner has them. So does the parking lot across the street. And the traffic light on the corner. Amazing how much of this town is under surveillance when you really think about it. Marcus looked up at Big Mike with something that might have been hope. Does this mean you'll really help me? Kid, Big Mike said, kneeling down to Marcus's level again, we've been trying to prove to society that people can change, that ex-cons can become productive members of the community. You just gave us the perfect opportunity to show everyone what we're really made of. The grandfather started backing toward the door, finally realizing he'd walked into something much bigger than he'd bargained for. This isn't over. I'll be back with lawyers, with police, with people who matter in this town. You do that, Tommy called after him. We'll be waiting. As the grandfather's truck peeled out of the parking lot, the ex-convicts turned their attention back to Marcus, who was staring at them with a mixture of amazement and residual fear. What happens now? Marcus whispered. Big Mike exchanged a look with the others that communicated volumes. They'd all been thinking the same thing. This wasn't just about helping one kid anymore. This was about proving that people who'd made mistakes could still do the right thing when it mattered most. Now, Big Mike said, we're going to show your grandfather what real family looks like. And we're going to make sure he never hurts you again. But as they began planning their next move, none of them realized that Marcus had one more secret hidden in that backpack. Something that would change everything they thought they knew about this case and turn their rescue mission into something far more dangerous and complex than any of them had bargained for. 3 hours later, the grandfather returned to the Rainbow Diner, but this time he wasn't alone. Behind him walked Officer Jenkins, the corrupt cop who'd been ignoring Marcus's abuse reports, along with 2 other officers who clearly didn't want to be there. These are the troublemakers I told you about, the grandfather announced loudly, pointing at the ex-convicts. They've been harassing me and trying to steal my grandson with lies and threats. Officer Jenkins nodded smugly. All right, everyone up. We're taking you all in for questioning about kidnapping and criminal conspiracy. But Big Mike didn't move. Instead, he smiled, a cold, calculated expression that made even the officers nervous. Officer Jenkins, before you do anything you might regret, you should probably see this. Marcus stood up slowly, pulling one final item from his backpack, not just a camera this time, but a small recording device that had been running the entire time. My real dad was a private investigator before he died, Marcus said quietly. He taught me that the most dangerous people are the ones who think they're untouchable. The grandfather's face went white. What are you talking about, boy? I'm talking about the phone calls, Marcus replied, his young voice steady and strong for the first time. The ones you made to Officer Jenkins every time I tried to get help. The ones where you laughed about how easy it was to fool everyone. Elena held up her phone, which had been live streaming to Facebook for the past hour. 1,700 people are watching this conversation right now, including several journalists and the district attorney's office. Officer Jenkins started backing toward the door, but Carlos stepped into his path. "Where you going, officer? Don't you want to hear the rest?" Marcus pressed play on the recording device. The grandfather's voice filled the diner, crystal clear and unmistakably his. "Jenkins," the kid called CPS again. "Handle it like last time. Tell them he's lying and I'll have your money ready by Friday. These bleeding hearts don't know what real discipline looks like." Officer Jenkins's voice responded, "Don't worry, Frank. I've been covering for you since your daughter got too mouthy. Nobody's going to believe some orphan kid over upstanding citizens like us." The silence that followed was deafening. The two honest officers with Jenkins exchanged horrified looks, their hands moving instinctively toward their handcuffs, but not for the ex-convicts. "There's more," Marcus continued, his confidence growing with each word. "Including the part where you admitted to pushing my mom down the stairs and paying Officer Jenkins to cover it up." The grandfather lunged forward, his face twisted with rage. "You little bastard. I should have finished you off years ago." But he never reached Marcus. Tommy stepped between them, catching the grandfather's wrist in a grip that made the older man cry out in pain. "That's assault on a minor in front of 12 witnesses and a live stream. You just confessed to murder and child abuse on camera." Doc looked up from his phone. "The FBI just arrived outside. Turns out they've been investigating Officer Jenkins for corruption for months, and this recording is exactly what they needed." The corrupt officer tried to run, but found his path blocked by Elena and two other ex-convicts. "Going somewhere, officer? Don't you want to explain to your colleagues why you've been taking bribes to cover up child murder?" Through the window, everyone could see federal agents surrounding the building. The grandfather fell to his knees as the weight of his situation crashed down on him. "Please, I'll do anything. I'll give you money, I'll disappear, You'll what?" Big Mike asked coldly. "Apologize for 8 years of torture? Bring back his mother? Undo every nightmare you put this kid through?" One of the honest officers stepped forward, reading the grandfather his rights while the other called for backup. Officer Jenkins was already in handcuffs, his career and freedom gone in the span of 5 minutes. As the grandfather was led away in shackles, he looked back at Marcus one final time. The defiant child who'd walked into this diner asking for murder had transformed into something the old man had never expected, a survivor who'd outsmarted everyone who'd underestimated him. "How?" the grandfather whispered as he passed Marcus. "How did a stupid kid?" Marcus looked up at him with eyes that held no fear, only the quiet satisfaction of justice finally served. "You taught me that adults lie, that the system fails, and that sometimes good people have to do bad things to survive. I just learned the lesson better than you expected." The federal agents confirmed what everyone already knew: the recordings were authentic, the evidence was overwhelming, and both the grandfather and Officer Jenkins were facing life in prison for murder, conspiracy, child abuse, and corruption. As the police cars drove away, Marcus turned to his 12 protectors, tears streaming down his face, but for the first time in years, they were tears of relief, not pain. "What happens to me now?" he whispered. Big Mike knelt down to the boy's level one more time. "Now, kid, you get to find out what it feels like to have a real family." But the grandfather's final words echoed in everyone's minds. This wasn't just about one child's justice anymore. This was about proving that sometimes the most broken people can become the greatest protectors, and that redemption isn't just possible, it's necessary. 2 years later, Marcus stood on the stage of Cedar Elementary School, holding a trophy for the state science fair. In the audience, 12 ex-convicts sat in the front row wearing their best clothes, cheering louder than any biological family ever could. The grandfather had been sentenced to life in prison without parole for the murder of Marcus's mother and decades of child abuse. Officer Jenkins received 25 years for corruption and accessory to murder. Both men now spent their days in protective custody, because even hardened criminals don't tolerate child killers. "I want to thank my family," Marcus said into the microphone, his voice strong and confident. "Not the family I was born into, but the family that chose me when I needed them most." Big Mike wiped away a tear, remembering the terrified boy who'd walked into their diner with 10 crumpled dollars and a desperate plan. That same boy was now an honor student living in a safe home, surrounded by people who'd proven that sometimes the most dangerous men make the fiercest protectors. The adoption had been finalized 6 months ago. Elena, who'd completed her nursing degree while on parole, became Marcus's legal guardian. The other ex-convicts formed an unofficial extended family, each contributing their skills to raise a child who'd already seen too much of the world's cruelty. Tommy taught Marcus how to fix cars and motorcycles. Carlos showed him self-defense and the importance of standing up for others. Doc, who'd returned to medical school with help from a scholarship program, helped with homework and showed Marcus that people could truly change their lives. But the real transformation wasn't just in Marcus, it was in all of them. The Rainbow Diner had become an unofficial community center where other children could come for help. The ex-convicts had created a network that protected kids whose voices weren't being heard by the system. Marcus made us better men, Big Mike later told a reporter from the local newspaper. He showed us that our past mistakes could become our greatest strengths when we used them to protect the innocent. The story had attracted national attention, leading to policy changes in how law enforcement handles child abuse reports. Officer Jenkins's corruption case had exposed a network of officials who'd been covering up domestic violence for years. 7 more officers were arrested, and the entire department was restructured. Marcus kept that original $10 bill framed in his bedroom, not as a reminder of desperation, but as proof that sometimes the most broken people can become your greatest salvation. He'd learned that family isn't about blood or DNA, it's about people who show up when the world turns its back on you. The grandfather died in prison 3 years later, alone and forgotten. His death made the local obituary section in 2 sentences, while Marcus's high school graduation would later fill 3 newspaper pages celebrating a young man who'd overcome impossible odds. On graduation day, Marcus delivered the valedictorian speech to a packed auditorium. His words echoed the lesson his unlikely family had taught him. Sometimes the people society has given up on are the ones with the most to give. Sometimes the most dangerous-looking angels are exactly what a desperate kid needs. The 12 ex-convicts, now all successful members of society with jobs, families, and clean records, stood as Marcus received his diploma. They'd proven that redemption isn't just possible, it's powerful enough to save lives and change communities. Marcus went on to study criminal justice, with plans to become a child advocate attorney. His mission was simple: make sure no child ever has to walk 3 miles in the rain looking for killers because the system has failed them. The grandfather had tried to destroy Marcus, but instead created someone stronger than he could ever imagine. Marcus learned that the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies, it's building something beautiful from the ashes of their cruelty and proving that love can triumph over violence when good people decide to act. If this story touched your heart and showed you that second chances can change the world, subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories of redemption, justice, and the power of unexpected heroes who prove that family is defined by love, not blood.